ahead and get started. Welcome everybody to Let's Talk Turkey today, our little lunch lecture. My name is Stephanie Barrett, for those of you who I have not yet met. I'm starting to see lots of familiar faces though, so this is pretty cool. Some repeat folks from the Flytrap Frolic last week as well, which was a good time had by all. So first of all, just a little housekeeping. Let's have everybody keep their microphones on mute during the talk. And if you think of a question, you can type it into the chat and we'll come back around to it at the end. Or you can hold it till the end and you can unmute and you can ask it yourself at the end. I'd like to introduce to you today our speaker. He is a current board of director member of the Coastal Land Trust, Tommy Hughes, and he is also the retired coastal supervising wildlife biologist for the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission. Tommy knows just about everything there is to know about turkeys in eastern North Carolina. So today he's going to offer his expertise and give us a primer on the life history, population trends, restoration, and management of wild turkey in North Carolina. So without further ado, Tommy, thank you very much for being here, and we will look forward to learning a little bit about turkey today.
Well, thank you for inviting me for this, and I welcome everybody here today. Many of you have probably noticed over the last several years as you ride through rural North Carolina, early in the morning or late in the afternoon, it's not unusual to see a flock of turkeys picking greens or bugging in some of the fields that we have in our coastal portion of North Carolina. But the funny thing about that is that's not always been the case. The turkey is an excellent example of a wildlife restoration success that has been a great benefit to North Carolina. So with that being said, let's talk turkey. First thing we need to know about turkeys is a little bit about their life history, because to understand the bird, we need to understand how it lives. And one thing we look at when we see turkeys, the turkey of today is a much different turkey than the wild turkey is a much different turkey than the domestic turkey that you think of that you eat at Thanksgiving. They're both the same species, but the domestic turkey has been bred to produce the big meat breast, and that's there for consuming, whereas the wild turkey is a very slim bird, agile, a fast runner, an excellent flyer, and is really adapted for living out in the woods where the domestic turkey would not do very well. Now, when we look at turkeys, we got to learn something about male turkeys and female turkeys. Male turkeys that are usually older than a year, we call gobblers. They're called gobblers because they typically gobble in the spring. A male bird that's less than a year is called a jay. Now, when you look at this bird that you see on the left in the slide, you notice right off the bat, it's a very dark bird, almost black looking. The reason for that, the male turkey has breast feathers that are tipped in black, which give it a very dark appearance. And that's something that when you see a bird at a distance, you can distinguish between a hen turkey and a male turkey by just looking at that coloration a lot of times. The other thing you notice with this turkey, you see that it's got some red in its head. And particularly in the springtime, as birds get into breeding season, gobblers tend to have blood that engorges that tissue that makes it red looking. Another thing that you notice is this whisk looking, broom looking stuff that comes off the breast, and that's called a beard. Most male turkeys have beards, and that beard is formed from a modified feather. And the beard is normally longer in older birds and shorter in jakes. Jake being a bird that's less than 1 year old. As you get into older age, these beards grow longer, but that beard length can be affected by many things. You can see feather mites get in a beard and actually eat the feathers and shorten it. You can see a turkey that may tangle the beard up in something and break it off, or in areas that tend to have ice storms, the beard can get iced up and the beard will get broken that way. So when you look at a beard of a turkey, you can't always use that beard to age the turkey in years. Another thing that you notice that you might not see in birds, you know, where you may see domestic birds that go 30, 40 pounds, a big wild turkey, adult gobbler, will weigh somewhere in the neighborhood around 21 pounds, but they go larger than that. We get some up in the 25-pound range. While jakes, which are less than a year old, may weigh somewhere in the neighborhood of around 13 to 15 pounds. Female turkeys, when you look at this bird, you notice right off the bat it's a different coloration. They're kind of dull looking, which is important from a camouflage standpoint, since they sit on a nest. You notice that the breast feathers are tipped in buff, which gives that turkey kind of a brown coloration. The head of a female turkey is typically blue color. The bird is just as agile as far as running and flying as a male, but it's not as large. Adult hens weigh between 8 to 11 pounds. Now, when we talk turkey, we think adult female turkey is normally called a hen, whereas a young female turkey, less than a year old, is called a jenny. And when we see young turkeys, both males and females, that are usually younger than in the fall, we kind of refer to those as poults. Now, there's a lot of differences when you look at signs from turkeys that help you identify the age and sex of a bird. When you're out in a field or a place that you see turkey tracks, those can help you identify whether that is a male, a gobbler, or a hen, female turkey. Typically what you see in hens, the middle toe of that track is less than 4.5 inches long. Whereas in gobblers, you see the middle toe, which will be greater than 4.5 inches, much bigger track. Another thing that you can look at, like I mentioned earlier, breast feathers. If you find breast feathers where a bird has been dusting in a dust bowl and shed some feathers, you'll notice that the breast tip on the tom, the adult gobbler, is black tip, like you see there, whereas a hen is that buff color. Another way to age a turkey is looking at the wing feathers, the primaries, the outer wing feathers on the wing of the turkey. On young birds, immatures, less than a year old, we notice that the wing feathers are pointed and kind of real frayed looking and not barred all the way to the tip. Whereas when they molt these feathers as they get older, the primary feathers begin to get more rounded and they're barred all the way to the end. So a lot of times you may find a turkey wing feather, and that can help you identify what sex it is. Now, gobblers typically have spurs, and the spur length kind of changes through time. As you see right here in these turkey legs, you see a little bitty spur right there. That's from a jake. It's a little bud. And as that turkey typically gets older and older, that spur will grow longer and longer and sharper. And typically older, this is probably the more reliable technique to age a turkey, is looking at spur length. But I will say not all gobblers. There are some freak examples of older birds not having spurs. Another thing that you can look at when you look at a turkey is the fan, the back tail feathers that fan out when a turkey is strutting. You'll see that in an immature bird like a jake, the middle feathers tend to be longer than the outer portions of the tail fan. Whereas a mature bird, the feathers are all the same length. So these are some things that you can look at when you're out looking at turkeys to give you some idea whether you're looking at an adult hen, adult gobbler, or if you happen to turkey hunt, how old your bird may be by looking at the spur length. Now, turkeys are just like people. They make a lot of sound to communicate, and they have a lot of different noises they make in communicating with each other. me switch over here. The first sound that you hear early in the morning when turkeys are on the roost, and turkeys do roost in trees. They fly up early in or late at night, right before dark, into a tree to roost. That protects them from ground predators. But in the morning, when they get ready to fly down from the roost, they make a sound called a tree yelp. And it kind of lets them talk to each other, let them know that they're up there. And this is what it sounds like. A very soft sound. Now, turkeys also make other sounds, and one of them is the cluck. And a cluck is kind of a general communication sound. When maybe a hen sees a gobbler or another bird, it just kind of lets them know that they're there and that they're approaching. It's kind of a assuring sound. And it sounds something like this. Now, another sound that you hear in the turkey woods is a cackle. And it's usually associated with a bird maybe flying down from the roost, or maybe a hen getting excited when it sees a tom prior to breeding. And this is a real vocal sound. As you can see, that's a lot different than the sounds you've heard so far. Turkeys also have a sound they make when they think they've seen something that doesn't look safe or has some type of danger to them, and it's a sharp sound. It's a real loud putt. You can tell that's a real sharp sound, one note. Now, the other call that you hear a lot in the turkey woods is the yelp. This is kind of a general communication call. It can mean different things at different times of the year, and it's something that you hear often. And of course, gobble is something you hear a lot in the springtime as mature toms are trying to locate hens during the breeding season. Now, you may hear a gobble at different times of the year. Turkeys will do something we call shock gobble. When they hear a loud noise, thunderstorms, you'll hear turkeys gobble sometimes. But a gobble, it sounds just like this. So those are some of the sounds that you're apt to hear if you're in the woods during the time turkeys are most vocal. Now let's talk reproduction. You know, that's something that we've gone kind of through the breed. You know, we've learned something about what hens and toms look like, or gobblers. We've learned something about how they talk. Reproduction. Right now we're in the time that turkeys are sitting on their nest, hopefully on the eggs that they've laid. We find that the peak of the nesting season occurs about mid-April. Turkeys lay about 12 eggs. They're about the size of roughly a chicken egg. They incubate in about 28 days. So what we see is that most of our turkey poults that hatch in our state, unless it's a nest that's been broken up and the turkey re-nested, they tend to hatch around late May, early June. And one thing that is really tough on turkey poults, because they're covered in down when they hatch, that can affect survival a lot, are cool, wet rains that occur about the time they hatch, because the birds can get wet and die of hypothermia. Now, recruitment. When I worked for the Wildlife Commission, we always looked at recruitment because that let us know how our turkey flock was growing within the state. And we do surveys for that. And we saw that when we had 3 poults per hen or greater that occurred in late or in the early fall, say September, that was indication of a real good turkey hatch. So if you think about it, 12 birds basically hatch, and you're doing real good if you can get 3 of them to the fall. Survival is pretty tough for a turkey poult. And of course, when turkey poults hatch, they're covered in down, and they leave the nest immediately and follow the hen and start feeding. Population status. You know, where have we been with turkeys? Well, if we look at our past nationally, we know that wild turkeys were almost eliminated in the 1930s. We had less than 30,000 birds nationally. And this was due primarily to habitat destruction and unregulated hunting. In North Carolina, from the 1800s to 1960, you know, we saw turkey populations decline significantly. And there again, it was due to habitat loss, unrestricted hunting, and possibly some turkey diseases that were introduced into our wild flock. Now, the 1970s is a red letter date as far as turkeys in North Carolina. That's when we really began in earnest our restoration of turkeys in this state. In 1970, we estimated we didn't have but 2,000 birds statewide. To start trying to increase our turkey flock, the Wildlife Commission instituted a gobbler-only season in 1972 to protect our hens. In 1977, there were only 177 birds reported harvested in our state. Those are important numbers to remember. Presently, and this shows how things have changed so dramatically in North Carolina, in 2015, we estimated our turkey flock to be 265,000 birds. Our 2019 reported harvest was almost 19,000 birds compared to 177 back in the 70s. It was the second highest on record, and it looks like maybe this year will be even higher. We established turkeys in 2003 in all 100 counties of the state. And today we have turkey season in all 100 counties. Big difference. Well, how did we do this? Well, restoration and management. And turkey restoration involved a lot of hard work to get this done. Like I say, it started in the 70s, but since 1970, we have caught and moved over almost 5,700 wild turkeys. And they've been released on over 350 restoration sites in our state, from the mountains to the coast. Of that, about 4,300 of those birds were relocated in the 1990s. That was a real good year for us as far as turkey restoration goes. And of those 5,600 birds that were released, we acquired about 1,700 of those from other states through the National Wild Turkey Federation Superfund program. There were states, as you can see there, that had lots of turkeys, and they allowed us to have some of their turkeys that we could use in our restoration efforts. Now, if you look, I'm going to take you through a sequence here. If you look down here, that's a turkey net box. That's something we shoot rockets off the top of this box that deploy a net over turkeys that have been baited to a place to concentrate them for a net shot so we can capture them. Turkeys are baited, they get on site, we fire rockets. This is a 3-rocket net, goes over the turkeys. The turkeys are caught, banded, sexed, and banded, put in a specially designed box that was donated by international paper to the National Wild Turkey Federation, so they could be put in there so they don't injure themselves in transport. They're taken to a restoration site and released. Normally our restoration sites consist of 15 birds. We release 5 gobblers and 10 hens. This has been very successful. Management. There's a lot of things that you have to think about when managing turkeys. A lot of us think of big hardwood forests, but one of the things that's really critical for wild turkeys is brood habitat. That's for young turkeys, these poults, to find foods that are high in protein. And one of the high protein foods that out in the wild are insects. And grassy fields, grassy edges, fallow fields are really good at attracting insects and producing some seeds that wild turkeys can utilize. So brood management is important. Or brood habitat management is important. A lot of ways to do this. Old logging road can be seeded and developed to create good brood habitat. Wildlife openings can be seeded or manage the native vegetation to attract insects and grass seed production. So these little turkey poults have good places where they can feed and be able to see to protect themselves from predators. Other stuff we do to manage wild turkeys in this state are forest management. Here in the coastal plain, all our hardwood areas are basically in our river bottom, but we've got a tremendous amount of pine woods. And prescribed burning is a critical tool we use to manage these pine woods for a lot of species other than turkeys, but burning removes a lot of the shrubby competition that reduces the visibility for the bird to see. It also, as this green vegetation greens up after a fire, produces insects, and fruit production is increased, which are good feeding areas for turkeys. Even small clear cuts like you see here come back in a more rougher vegetation that's ideal for nesting. And this is critical for turkeys. Some people take it to another level. They like to manage openings. They use rotational discing or burning of abandoned agricultural fields to promote native plants that are good for turkeys. Not only do they produce insects, but seed production. Other people like to really go very intense and plant certain species that are good for turkeys, such as winter foods like chufa and small grains. Clovers are good for spring bugging, and millets are good for spring bugging and seeds. So there's a lot of things that people can do to create better habitat for turkeys. If you're going the planting route, you just need to make sure that you look at your soil recommendations before you do that. Hunting. Hunting in North Carolina is important to our sportsmen. And the number of turkey hunters has grown tremendously over the years as we've restored our turkey flock. Currently, we have a spring season in North Carolina. We only allow the harvest of male birds, and that's important. And our turkey season is basically set to occur during the nesting time that hens are setting on these nests, so they'll be less vulnerable to accidental harvest. Gobbler numbers change from year to year, as I said, depending on reproduction. But one thing good about harvesting adult or even any male turkey, it does not affect population growth. So given the trend of our turkey flock in North Carolina, this is a true success for North Carolina. And we've been able to take a species that was almost gone from the state in the 70s and restore it so it's very abundant today. And from that, I'll take any questions you may have.
Awesome. Tommy, thank you so much. I had no idea that you could shoot rockets off the top of a box and capture turkeys. That's pretty cool.
Well, one thing about it, the trapezoid net box probably changed a lot of turkey restoration in the fact that you can transport that box into small areas and actually shoot over sites that you couldn't use a larger net. It was too difficult. And we also drug trapped turkeys a long time ago using a tranquilizing drug. They would put it on the corn and they would eat it, and then they would just kind of fall to sleep all the time. We would go pick them up.
Are there other questions from the audience?
Tommy, this is Ann Simpson. I have a question for you. We live down a long gravel road that goes through Piedmont wooded habitat. And for the last few months, we've seen a lot of scratching up in the leaves along the road, these long strings of kind of regular scratching. And several people have said that might be wild turkeys. What, do they do that?
Yes. Matter of fact, you can look, turkeys are real big scratchers. You can see where they go through hardwood areas and they'll scratch the leaves off to find any type of food that may be under the leaves. You can actually look at the scratching size a lot of times and identify whether that was a hen or a gobbler. And you'll see it in field edges. You'll see it a lot of places because they do scratch to forage for food.
Well, thank you. It's been a big mystery for us to try and figure out what that is doing.
And if you get a flock of turkeys coming through, there'll be a lot of scratching. It'll be more than one bird doing the scratching, so it could be spread out over a larger area.
Well, we haven't seen any this year, but in the past we have seen flocks and individuals coming through. There's a field right next to the road where the scratching goes on. So that's a good to know. We can keep an eye out for that.
And hopefully here in about another 25 days or so, you might keep your eyes open for some little turkey poult. Because they'll probably hatching pretty soon, towards the end of the month, 1st of June.
All right, are there any other questions? Tommy, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today and to share your expertise. I learned a heck of a lot. I did not grow up hunting or anything, and so I definitely learned a lot about turkey today. Thank you very much.
Yeah, great conservation success story, Tommy. Thank you for sharing that. It's nice to have some good news.
Well, that's true, and this is a good one.
Very good.